Okay, I think we're live on YouTube right now. I think we're live on YouTube. Yes, yes, yes. I think so. What's going on, YouTube Nation? I hope everyone is joining me from Facebook and YouTube and social media. Today we're going to be going live since we're stuck in the house anyway. Decided to do some live guitar lessons. I'd be very happy to answer all of your questions. Yeah, that's it. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share this stuff. I'm going to be doing a live lesson a day for the next little while we are with this virus situation around the world. And we're basically stuck at home most of the time. So in between speaking with clients, because I got to do that too, and dealing with kids, because I got 3 crazy kids that might pop in and out of the video, doing these lessons. Now, today's lesson is going to be all about sliding and bending strings, what that's all about for beginners, intermediate, and advanced techniques. So when it comes to sliding from one note to the next, we have to understand kind of our target, what the purpose is, and the technique behind it, and why we'd be doing it, and how it helps with phrasing. Then we're going to talk about bending, because sliding and bending is just 2 different ways of getting from one note to another. And then we're going to talk about a few different concepts from bending, how to bend in tune. Again, this is beginner, foundational stuff. And then we're going to move into some very cool things in terms of targeting tone, bending in from notes that are not typically in a particular scale. So it's going to be pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to noodle around a little bit. If you guys have any questions, let me know. As it seems right now, I could be talking to nobody. I could be talking to a million people. I wouldn't know the difference. This is my first live stream. So we are going to start with learning about sliding. In order to do that, we're going to have to understand a basic fundamental technique. So we're going to have to sort of be working from the same page. Let's talk about a particular key center. Let's just stay in A minor. All right, we're going to learn an A minor pentatonic scale. If you don't know it already, it's just going to be the first position of the scale. So on the 6th string here, you're going to put your first finger on the 5th fret. You're going to play that note. Then you're going to put your 4th finger on the 8th fret. Okay, then on the next string, so 2 note per string scale. So 1, first finger on the 5th fret, 4th finger on the 8th fret. On the 5th string, you're going to put your first finger on the 5th fret, 3rd finger on the 7th fret. On the 4th string, like same thing, 5th fret, 7th fret. 4th string, first finger 5th fret, 3rd finger 7th fret. 2nd string, first finger 5th fret, 4th finger 8th fret. 1st string, first finger 5th fret, 4th finger 8th fret. Okay, so that's the A minor pentatonic scale, first position. All right, and then you can go backwards as well. Now, that's the A minor pentatonic scale. The reason why we need to understand the context in which we're working is because otherwise people think bending is bending for the sake of bending, or sliding for the sake of sliding. You're sliding from a note to somewhere random, and that's not the case at all. You really want to target a specific note when you're bending to it or sliding to it. So let's talk about sliding first. The way to practice that, again, A minor pentatonic first position. All right, we've established that's what we're working with in here, okay? These are the only notes that we're using. So if I wanted to slide right now, just using these notes, I would say use my 3rd finger, or let's use my 3rd finger, and slide from one of the 5th fret notes. So we're on the 4th string, 5th fret, sliding up to the 7th fret on the same string. Okay, so I can do that really with each of them. Now I'm using the fingers that I'd normally be using for the higher notes here. So 4th finger here on the 6th string, 3rd finger. Oh, oops. All right, I can do the same thing with my 1st finger going down. Okay, I use my 1st finger the whole way there. So you get the idea. You're just sliding into other notes of the scale, okay? You can slide up. Just using my first finger right now. Or down. So that's the basics of sliding right there. Remember, you have a target tone. I'm not just sliding randomly. You can do that, but so if I'm playing something, let's put in an A minor chord in the background. All right, hopefully you guys can hear that. So I'm improvising over like an A minor groove. Pretty simple. All right, I can go. Hear that? There's a little improvisation with some sliding around, okay? But I'm not going to slide randomly to random notes. I'm sliding way out of tune. I don't know what I'm doing. It sounds ridiculous, right? So you have to understand that you're targeting notes when you're sliding to somewhere, okay? So generally speaking, right here, you're going to slide. If we're just working within the context of one position, slide from any one of the notes to the other ones, okay? So that's an example of sliding. Now, to take that one step further, we would need to understand more than just one position of the minor pentatonic scale, okay? For example, that's the first position of the minor pentatonic scale. If we know the second position, it looks like this. All right, so that's just going up. We play the first two notes of the first position, so our pinky's on the 8th fret here. What we're going to do is we're going to put our second finger here, okay, on the 8th fret, and we're going to play 2, 4, the fingering, so which essentially is like this. Second finger on the 8th fret, 4th finger on the 10th fret. On the 5th string, we've got our first finger on the 7th fret, 4th finger on the 10th fret. On the 4th string, first finger 7th fret, 4th finger 10th fret. On the 3rd string, we've got our first finger on 7th fret. We've got our 3rd finger on the 9th fret. 2nd string, 2nd finger 8th fret, 4th finger 10th fret. Then here on the 1st string, 2nd finger 8th fret, 4th finger 10th fret. So if we just work within a 4-fret box, okay, 1 finger per fret all the way across, just like in the first position, then I can just call it the fingering, all right? If we know that we're starting on the 2nd finger on the 8th fret, then anytime we use our first finger, it's going to be assigned to the 7th fret, 2nd finger to the 8th fret, 3rd finger to the 9th fret, 4th finger to the 10th fret. So if I say 2, 4 on the 6th string here, I'm playing the 8th fret, 10th fret. Make sense? So the pattern is 2, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 4. I'll do it again slowly. 2, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 4. It's the same scale, it's just in a slightly different area or position of the neck. So it's called second position, starting on the second note of the scale. So the first position again was this. Given our fingering, little method of saying what we're doing. 1, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 4, right? Then 2, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 4. All right. Now that we're past that, most people watching this will probably know that. If you're a very beginner, you may not. So check out a lesson that I'll post just specifically on those separately from this, okay? But let's just assume we know that now. So if we're sliding from the first position, 1, 4, to the second position, 2, 4, that middle note is shared between both positions. So what I can do is play 1, 4, and slide up 2 frets to get to that next note of the second position. Same thing on the next string, or I can use my 4th finger to get sort of in the proper position. Whoops. There we go. All right. I'm working within that framework. So if I'm sliding, oh, sorry. So I'm sliding in and out of notes right there. Again, against that backing rhythm. That sounds familiar. Different examples of just sliding around those two positions. So we always have a targeted note in mind when we're sliding. That's sort of beginner number one, okay? Now, to get that to a more intermediate level, all right, so we've got the basics down. What we can do then is take it and understand that we don't have to slide from a particular note that's in the scale. We can slide from an off note into an on note, meaning we have first position here. Great. So all those notes work. If I play notes in and around that scale that aren't in that scale, some of them might kind of work, some of them will sound really off. These notes are just random, right? So using those notes, you're safe. The notes of the scale, they all sound good. So if I then played an off note here, we can hear that that doesn't really automatically work that well. But I can slide into a note that does. So if I'm not spending a lot of time on that, really creates a lot of tension, that bad note, I can slide into it. So we're getting into the idea of chromatics almost here. All right, so I'm using notes in and around the scale to slide into notes of the scale. I'm not spending a lot of time on these notes that are off because that creates a lot of tension in the sound, but to create a little bit of tension is cool because you relieve it once you get to that note. See, that's a blues note. That in itself creates a lot of tension. But if I go... I'm sliding just from one fret away into the good note, the safe note. So it creates some really cool phrasing ideas when you're playing. And the same thing holds true for bending now. So let's talk about bending because it's a little bit more challenging, especially if you're a beginner guitar player, especially if you're on an acoustic guitar, the strings tend to have more tension. They're a bit heavier. So when you're bending, and I use fairly heavy strings to begin with. I use 11 to 52 or 54. I don't remember what it was, maybe 52. So they're fairly heavy strings to begin with. But when you are now talking about bending into notes, it's the same idea. You're not bending randomly from a note to some random place. I'll show you what I mean. It'll sound very out of tune. It just sounds like I'm drunk and have vertigo, right? So we're again using these notes, staying in that same context of A minor right now, the A minor pentatonic scale, first and second position. I can bend from one note into the other. The easiest way to do that is just to start with one target, okay? Now, typically speaking, you have bends that are half-step bends, meaning you're bending from one fret to the next, and whole step bends, meaning you're bending from one fret up to 2 frets, okay? That's your target tone. And now the other is the half step. So you got to practice the feel. A lot bending is a lot to do with feel, okay, and tension under the strings and your fingers. So the The best way to do that I can think of right now would be to use little targets like this. So let's say we're just using our first finger on the first string 5th fret. That's our reference note, that A. So we want to be able to bend, let's say this note, up to same note. You can hear when it gets there, right? I'm a little flat, I'm there, okay? Now I'm sharp. Bring it down into, okay? You got to find that comfort zone, finding that note. So that's how you need to experiment to start. Now let's just talk technique for a second. If you've never bent notes before, it can be very taxing on your fingers. So I typically bend with my 3rd finger. Okay, if we're talking about bending higher notes, more traditionally, we're bending on the higher notes, and we're using these other 2 fingers to help push. So the 3rd finger is pushing down on the note. For example, let's just use this one. We're gonna bend up to here. You see these other 2 fingers are coming to help, right? I'm not doing it with 1 finger alone. That would be very difficult. Kind of like missing it, getting it. I don't have that same amount of control. So that 2nd finger and 1st finger are really pushing up on the string, whereas the 3rd finger is pushing down on the note itself. And these are coming to help push it up. So all 3 can bend together. Okay, that's a great way to get started and understand that, you know, it's not just 1 finger, it's your whole hand that's helping the bend. So I've got that note there. If I'm a little flat, you can definitely hear it if I'm sharp. So you can practice like this, doing 2 at the reference note and the bending note at the same time, or just the. All right. So any note I bend, even if I go here, and I typically use my 4th finger in first position, I would use my 3rd finger to bend. My 4th finger just isn't quite, doesn't have that grip I need or the strength. So I'm pushing down on the note, and I'm sacrificing exact proper fingering in order to be able to use the bending technique, if you will. And a lot of people use this way. But I tend to use somewhat proper fingering most of the time. Anyway. So the great thing about bending is it evokes a lot of emotion, right? There's a lot of emotion in the playing. That's that sort of very stereotypical guitar, bluesy, blues rock lick. Now here I went. First finger, I did a bend. Notice I'm pulling down on the string. So if I were to push it up, it would really kind of separate the nail from the skin. You know that feeling, that terrible, terrible feeling? It just doesn't work as well. But if I'm pulling down on it with my first finger, it tends to work a lot better. So if I'm typically, again, there's rules and there's ways to break them and reasons why. But typically speaking, I'm pulling down if I'm bending with my first finger, and I'm pushing up if I'm bending with my 3rd finger. Those are the 2 fingers I typically bend from, but as you'll see as we move a little bit more advanced, we can use any finger you want, depending on how far you want to bend. Now, there are players like David Gilmour that do these amazing bends. All you have to do is listen to the solo from Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, and he's got this bend that's like, my guitar tends to choke out at that fret, but so I tend to do a slide just because my guitar tends to choke out because of the vintage radius on it. I'm sure if I set it up better, it wouldn't be quite as bad. But anyway, so that's a 1.5 step bend, which is crazy. But typically speaking, we're talking about 1/2 step bends. Again, that's 1 fret. So if I was doing from a bend from just random notes right now, no, that note to that note, very jazzy. That's a half step bend. A whole step bend is 2 frets, right? If I was doing a step and a half, it's kind of hard, especially on 11s, to bend a step and a half right there. So that's how you practice it. Use one reference note, go ahead and play little licks like that. So if we bring that all together right now and bring together sliding and bending, I'm going to play, again, just A minor pentatonic first position, over the A minor chord at second position. Whoops. So I'm just going to use those notes, and I'm going to incorporate some slides and some bends, all right? And we'll see how much more fluid it sounds. So I'll start with just playing the notes, which is cool. Whoops, I got to play the right notes. Sounds good. It's a little bit staccato-y, but as I incorporate some slides and some bends into it, it'll get a little bit more fluid. So what I do there, that's something we should talk about. I did a pre-bend, meaning I bent up to the note, but I didn't play the first note first and then bend up to it. Whoa, I went over that. Okay, I didn't bend up to it like this. I pre-bent the note. That's the note we're going for. It's hard to do this and talk at the same time, and then release. That's a very different kind of sound than, or even, so you can do it 3 different ways, really. You can go ahead and bend up to a note. You can pre-bend the note, release it, and you can do it all together. Bend and release. Right? So this just gives you more options when you're trying to phrase and play. Let's play over top of that loop again. Oh, sorry. Trying to not play the in-between notes. So there's an example right there. All right, so that's a bunch of sliding and bending the very traditional way from one note into the next. Now, when we were talking about sliding in the beginning, we went a little bit more advanced and started talking about sliding from in between notes into correct notes. We can do the same thing when it comes to bending, okay? So I'll give you an example right here. If we're just on the first 2 strings of the A minor pentatonic scale, first position, all right, I can, instead of this note, I'll play this note, okay? And I'll bend up to this note. Half step bend. So I incorporated then a proper full step bend there. So that's a cool little lick to do. Let's hear it in context. So I did the same thing on the first string now. So I'll do it on some different strings. Again, just from a half step down from the proper note, bending up into the actual note. So again, that note sounds terrible, but again, anytime you do any technique too much, it's going to sound a little obnoxious. So we're really like stretching it out here and beating it to death. But that's how you practice it and learn it and understand it. And when you're actually playing, you don't use it quite as much as I'm using it right here. But we're just giving an example. So there you go. I'll do that again. So I'm doing a pull. You've heard that? Instead of that. It's just a different way of playing the same thing that sounds kind of cool, right? Doing it there. It's kind of hard with the fingers. All right, so that's a way to do that half step below, kind of in between. Now you can move a half step below these lower notes and do the same thing. Again, I'd be using my first finger, so see, I'm really sliding in and out of things right now, so it's making the phrasing sound pretty cool. Do that to the backing track again. You can do the slide as well. So here I'm sliding one fret out, okay? I'm using some chromatics now. Back into it. So as long as you're using these in-between notes very briefly and not really landing on them, like it doesn't really sit well in your ear. As long as you land on the proper notes, so I'll just sort of let loose for a minute and try to incorporate all these different things that we've talked about, and you'll hear what it sounds like, okay? All right, so I'm going dancing around the notes a little bit in first position of the minor pentatonic scale to really understand how to phrase using slides and bends. I'm really not sure how to see comments or questions while I'm doing this. So maybe I'll just jam it out a little bit longer on an A minor pentatonic. If anybody has any questions, if anyone's listening, definitely reach out. Let me know that you're there. This is my first live stream. I really don't know what the heck I'm doing with it. But I'm trying to give you some decent information. So again, to recap, talking about slides, you're sliding, you're targeting to a note. When you're bending, you're targeting to a note. You're not coming from a note and going somewhere random. You're targeting a specific note. Okay, so it's about phrasing and really experimenting. Once you get past that point, you can start on notes that don't really belong in the scale and slide into notes that do. And that will make your phrasing sound a little bit more advanced, maybe a little jazzier, a little more chromatic, a little creative when you're, rather than, which is great and melodic, but sounds a little more emotive when you're playing it that way. I think I'll probably end my first live lesson there. So that's a little workshop on slides and bends. If you have any questions, leave your comments down below. If you have requests for different themes, different ideas and topics for lessons, I'm happy to do that as well. Over the next week at least, maybe 2, 3, 4, who knows? As long as this virus thing is going around, what we're going to do is I'll keep doing a live lesson every day. And like I said, if you have any requests, let me know. Until then, my name is Lauren, and please subscribe, like, and share. Thanks, guys.